It's like the Wayne's World action where they're like five, four.
Yeah.
Well,
Do,
thank you so much.
do
Oh,
you want
go
to hear
ahead. What
something?
were you
You
say?
want to hear a funny story?
Yeah, please.
So when I was at DreamWorks, it's not like a thing, but we invented it. We did it with Netflix, where we created the New Year's countdown with the Madagascar characters, and we would do it for parents so they could show it at like 6 o'clock at night to their kids. Because like, there's no way the kids are gonna stay up like till midnight. So they're like, okay, it's New Year's. Let's count down with the Madagascar characters. Five, four, three, two, one. And then
Oh
everyone
my
would get super
gosh.
excited. They celebrate New Year's. The kids go to bed at 7 o'clock.
That's
Everyone wins.
amazing.
Yeah.
Every parent thanks you so much for that because I did not know that. That is so good. We have to go download YouTube from last year to basically make them count down at like 8 p.m. You know what I mean?
Too funny.
Yeah, let me kick off the show, and I'm gonna keep this in there because it's kind of a fun way to start. I've never done it that way, but thank you for tuning into another episode of the Girl Dad Show. We are very very excited to have Brian on the show. It's been a labor of love getting him on the show. A lot of back and forth, a lot of time, but we're here and we did it right at the end of the year. So we made it at the cusp of season 4. So very very excited here. Brian, do you mind kicking us off by just telling a little bit about yourself to listeners, what you're working on right now, and what you do predominantly for work?
Yeah. Brian Schwartz, Detroit guy, Indiana Hoosier. Big game tonight. So hopefully, after this episode is over, I'm happy and not sad. But originally a marketing guy, lived in London for multiple years doing digital marketing. For that company, I lived in India, opening offices for the business for about a year, lived in China doing the same, moved back to the States, joined DreamWorks Animation, focused on marketing for about 6 years. When they got sold, I went to Expedia, same thing, focused on marketing globally for that business. And then, kind of what I call Life 2.0, I personally fell in this world of sitting on boards and advising high growth companies around digital marketing, growth, AI, all this good stuff. And in doing so, one of the companies I've been with for about 6 or 7 years, I started to uncover a bunch of other problems in things like finance and HR and supply chain, and decided to build an advisory group of former executives to kind of help these late stage companies as they're growing exponentially. We do that as a business first, but once we're inside a company, we use that to hopefully get unfair access and diligence to then look to invest in the company. So I'd say about 20-25% of my time on the personal side is kind of personal advisory, consulting, board work. And about 75% of my time is focused on our company size, which is the larger, broader advisory group, and then the fund that we're raising alongside of it.
Oh wow! So you're not busy at all. You
No,
got you got nothing
not,
going on.
not at all. And look, I know it's the theme of this show, but what I would say, which is the awesomest thing, is I don't have an office or a desk besides my home office. So
Mhm.
my life is like a hybrid, right? It's at home Zoom calls all day with like in person meetings around town here in Austin. But the coolest thing is my daughter was born in 2021, so she's quote unquote
Mm.
a COVID baby. And like, in the old world, you go to work all day in the office. In the new world, 1 o'clock comes around, she's banging on my door during Zoom calls. She's not wearing any clothes. She's like just wants her daddy. It's pretty cool to be able to have that experience to get to see and hang with your kid during times during the workday that you just didn't have before COVID.
Yeah, it definitely has changed up things a lot. I will say that for sure. And it is really cool that you have a home office still, even though that, most things have gone back. And so that's really cool to hear that. I bet you the kid loves it though. I mean, it's got to give her full access to be able to come and see whenever she
Totally.
wants. It doesn't
I
seem
don't
doesn't seem
I
like you
don't
really block her either.
Yeah, I don't think she knows any difference. I think the only times that it's a little sad is like, you take a break for like 5 or 10 minutes, you're hanging out, you're hugging her, and then you got to go back. You have a video call, right? And she just starts crying, and
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, like a knife to my heart, right? The
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is like make her upset. But I'll take the advantage of being able to spend ample time with her over the few times she gets upset that I have to leave.
She's now old enough to actually start to kind of articulate things though too. So I'm assuming she kind of has a semblance of like when you're working and not though too, right? She's trying to figure that out.
Yeah, she wants to join the video calls. So
Oh, nice.
that's not always helpful. So she definitely knows, but she's like, "Daddy, you on a video call? I want you to come on the video call." So she knows, but she's too smart for her own good.
I love that. That's great, man. And then I didn't know that you lived in all these other Asian countries. What was that like? And how old were you when you did that?
Yeah, I've lived in 5 countries. I've been to about 80. Most of my roles have been global or international in scope. I was well, let me take a step back. So in high school, I studied abroad my junior year. In college, I studied abroad my junior year. And then when I was probably 24, I moved to London. And then probably when I was 26, I was in India, 27 in China, and then back to the States when I was like 29 or something like that. And then, when I was back in the States, I joined DreamWorks and then Expedia and immediately went to these like global roles. So even though I was based in the
Wow.
States, I was constantly all over the world. At one point before I went global, I was overseeing Latin America, I was overseeing Asia, I was overseeing Australia. So I was like even though I was overseeing it based in LA, I had to physically be in the market. So I'd spend lots of time all over the world. Obviously, we didn't have kids, so my wife was totally fine with it. And then once we had my daughter, it was kind of post that life. So it is nice to not be able to have to constantly be on the road internationally to be able to spend time with my family.
Totally. Travel is the hardest thing when you're trying to have kids, and then obviously the first year of having kids is really diabolical to mix that in. So I definitely get that.
Yeah,
Um,
you get the text messages for your wife when she's pregnant on how pissed she is about something, and you're on the road, and there's literally nothing you can do about it, and you're like, "Thank you."
the
Like, what do you want me to do?
well, the emotions are like unbelievable. Like the chemical reactions and the emotions are unbelievable. For guys, it's really hard because they completely or we're unprepared. We're unprepared for it. We don't know what that feels like, and it's also hard to like process, So
My
it's a
my
very
wife
interesting
says it,
experience.
and I agree with her. I could never carry a baby. I wouldn't last a day. She's 100% correct.
So, do you think that you studying abroad helped you get these kind of global jobs and kind of segued you into that more nicely, or do you think there's a lesser part of that?
I actually think it's a step back. So my mother is a travel agent. She has a love for travel, even to this day. She's still like a high-end luxury travel agent. So I kind of grew up with this gene
Mm,
from like a young age. I think going into third grade, I went to summer camp in Wisconsin. I lived in Michigan, so I'd go away every summer. So kind of the ability to get away and go out, I think, is ingrained with me. So
mhm.
I think going in high school, going in college, it was just very easy for me to get up and move post college when I went to London. I think from time between like 18 and 29 or something like that, I lived in a different place every year per year. Like it could be the same city, could be
Wow.
the same city, but like a different
Yeah.
house or
House.
location or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. And it was just table stakes. It was just natural. I was just so used to being on the move that it didn't really matter to me. And even to this day, we still have the bug every year. We go somewhere internationally, my wife and I, just because I've been so used to it and conditioned my entire life that if I'm not getting out and experiencing it, I just feel like I'm missing something inside.
Oh, wow. Because it's just become part of who you are.
Totally. And,
And
and
then how about?
luckily, and by the way, luckily, my wife too. She did semester at sea in college, so she
Mhm.
took a boat all over the world, and she's very well traveled too. And it's very much a passion for her. So it's just great that we both truly kind of embrace and enjoy this like international global footprint. That like when it's like time to figure out a trip, we both get like super excited about it.
That's awesome. And so, just out of curiosity, what are you thinking about for your kid? Are you wanting that same kind of thread of travel embedded in their lives and kind
Well,
of being a
yeah,
core essence of it?
it's a good question. So, her preschool that she's currently at is about 30 minutes away from us.
Hmm.
So, because of everything we just talked about, one of the things when I was abroad that I just really admired was the international school, like the International School of London, the International School of
Mm.
Tokyo. Like all these cities have an international school that has kind of the same type of curriculum, but it
Yeah,
really embraces that global feel. And there's an International School of Texas. So we actually applied and she got into the International School of Texas. Ultimately, we didn't decide to make the move because we felt like she'd already kind of built this community, both for us too, with the parents and the kids for the preschool that she was currently in. But yeah, like it's very important for us to have that aspect. It might not be in school, but I tell my wife she wants to bring her on all these trips now. I'm like, she just can't embrace it. And it's like not really a vacation for us if we have like a 3 year old who's jet
yeah.
lagged the whole time. But I said the moment that she becomes of age where she can really understand it, embrace it, appreciate it, we both want it to be a core part of her lifestyle.
I think that that's really powerful because I talk about this quite a bit with my wife recently, as our kids are now like 5 and 7, so they're starting to like figure out who they are and like doing a lot more questioning of different things. But what I'm realizing is that it's not even just about the vacation. It's actually almost like something that I want to force my kids into because I feel like traveling forces them to one, deal with adversity and being uncomfortable, but two, also being in places that they're not familiar with. And then also just understanding different lifestyles and cultures and people. Just the sheer fact of like exposing them to different things and different peoples is like so vitally important. It's not even like it's not even about vacationing. I don't even care if it's extra work for me at this point. I'm almost like I need to do this at least once a year. What do you think
Yeah,
about that?
you're articulating like a vision I have, which I don't think I'll ever personally pursue, but I tell everyone when I share this story, if they want to do it, I will help finance it and do whatever I can to be involved. I actually think the direction you're going is kind of the future of what college should be, right? Like college is a
Mm,
very expensive endeavor, and I just question the return on investment. Like
yeah,
I was just looking for fun because I put money aside for my daughter for her education. I looked
yeah.
at my wife went to Michigan, I went to Indiana, I looked at Stanford. I just looked at the cost of 4 years of college. And on the low end, it's like 275 up to like almost $400,000.
It's
And the
crazy,
question
man.
is is that worth it? Like, what did you learn in college? Like for me, like everything I study, I don't use. Like I
Yeah.
learned work ethic and I learned how to like become who I am, right? And the question is like, can you do that elsewhere? And I think kind of what you're articulating is a really great way. Like, could you create like a 1 or 2 year program post college where you have like a rotational program in different cities around the world for kind of best in class engineering, digital marketing, and programming, right? Things every company essentially needs. And you kind of tick a bunch of boxes, right? Like you could just get a job straight out of the program, or you can go to college. You can like do stupid shit and figure out who you are because you're in a random country around the world for
Yeah.
like six
Yeah.
months as a 19-year-old. And then
Yeah.
the last piece you'd have to figure out, which is how does it check the box as like an alternative to college? I don't know if we'll ever get there, but I really think that that aspect of going around the world and figuring out who you are and being embraced into cultures that are just so different than you is like to me as impactful of 4 years of education in a state school or something like that. So hopefully somebody one day will pursue it and I'll be a backer of it. But I really
Yeah.
think that that aspect of getting around the world and getting out there really can impact people in a really positive way.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're a strong believer in this concept too. And I completely am like realizing that I need to force it to happen because if you don't, then they're going to keep staying in this little bubble and this echo chamber of what they know and what they believe in. And nothing's wrong with that. But at the same time, it's not how the world works, And I just feel like the people that seem to have a lot more self reliant, and I'll say it more personally. So my dad was an entrepreneur growing up, so he moved us around quite a bit. And this is kind of like very personal and being a little vulnerable, but if you set yourself up even in middle school in a certain like schema or personality type and you didn't like how that turned out for you and your friends, when you go to a new school, you could literally change who you are and say, "Hey, I didn't like that about this. I'm going to change that." And you can almost reset it. But that kind of mindset has helped me reinvent myself whenever I don't like something about myself, even as an adult in business. And I'm not sure my kids will ever learn that skill because they're going to basically grow up the way my wife grew up, the same friends from elementary school through high school, for the 20 years that we're going to be in our little small town. And so I got to find ways to like shake it, so that they can interject that kind of skill set of being it's okay to change yourself. You should self-reflect. You should look at yourself all the time and figure out what you like and don't like. And
Well, the
anyway,
easiest thing if you haven't done it is take them to Canada or take them to Mexico, because
yeah.
I don't know the stat, but there's some crazy stat. The amount of Americans who've never left the country. So like those are easy
Oh,
ways.
really?
Oh yeah, there's a crazy stat on how many people don't even have a passport, and there's a crazy stat of how many people have never left the United States. It's just absurd in terms of how large that population is. But easy step is go to Canada, go to Mexico, and then like take steps from there to get them to different countries and aspects. And by the way, like even in school, there's probably different cultures that they come across of their peers, right? So if it's India, China, whatever it is in terms of the kids that they're going to school with, like potentially have the opportunity to have them experience the country and the culture that they've come from.
Yeah, that's right. Super cool. So then walk me back through your decision. When did you decide that kids was the time? Like, how did you make the decision? Because it seems like not a good time. It sounds like you did it actually right in between the craziest part of building your businesses, right? Because you left. It sounds like you tell me. Yeah, you tell me what made you want to start having kids.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I just was talking to someone about it yesterday. Everyone has a different route, right? Like the reason that I was talking about yesterday is I was with a guy who's 35 years old, and he just had another baby, and he has four kids. He has a 5, 3, 2, and a baby. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and you just you knock it out, right? We kind of took a different approach, which was we got married, and then we said let's just do all the really fun things we want to do that it's hard to do when you have a kid. So that was number one. We just traveled a bunch. We just had a great time. And then number two is like I wanted to make sure that I could give the kid everything that they wanted and desired, and kind of how
Hmm.
I grew up, right? And for me, when I could do that when I was in the corporate world, but we weren't
Hmm.
ready yet. And then when I left the corporate world, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So it wasn't to a point where my business, the business, started really pushing and doing really well that I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to roll. Like now we have a house, we have space, we have like land, like we have areas for the kid to really embrace themselves and grow up. And that's when we said, okay, now is the right time to do it. And it's true. Like now if we have one kid, maybe two kids, three kids, whatever the number is, now I feel like I can really support that child and hopefully give them a great life and great experience. And that to me was really important when having a kid. But again,
You alluded.
everyone's different, right? Like the downside, which I never thought about this before I had a kid, but now that I had a kid, I think about it as like I'm going to be an old dad, not so old, right? I'm kind of be a middle aged dad, right?
Yeah.
Like because I was when my parents had me, they were 28, so I look at my parents now in terms of their age, and I look at where I'm going to be when I'm my parents' age and my kids' age. It is a little bit different. So there's pros and cons to each of them in terms of when you decide to have a child.
Totally. And I mean, just I'm in the same boat as you, man. I mean, we just have to be really good about staying healthy, both mentally and physically, just to keep up with them. But I have the same fears as well too, and not fears, but same concerns about the cons on that. But curiosity is around, do you want to lump them together? So if you do have more, are you going to try to like have another one sooner, or are you going to try to space it out?
Yeah, I think probably sooner than later. I mean, I think there's a positive for kids to be closer in age, right? As they grow up, they can take care of each other, they're self-sustainable. And I think also in the early days too, and you tell me since you have two that are 2 years apart, is, I think like the farther apart they are, not so far, you don't want them so far apart that they're not close. But when you have that second or that third, hopefully the first one becomes helpful. Right?
Yeah,
In certain things. Like even I notice it. We don't have a second, but even I notice it with my daughter. I go ask her to do something and she does it, which is
yeah,
awesome, right? That didn't
yeah.
exist a year ago, right? Like that
That's
that was
right.
not a thing. So I think there is that aspect of like, making the oldest one at least be a little more helpful when you have a baby that's on the way.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, we definitely have them close together, and it is true. They're very supportive of each other, and the first one is very helpful. And I will say because they're such close in proximity of age, they're very close as well too. And you could tell that they can actually like play, and they have similar friends, or they can like share friend groups, and that is pretty nice. But
And
you
what
did
and what
allude to some.
and I have a question for you now.
Yeah,
What you have two girls, right?
yeah,
So when you had the second and it was a girl, were
yeah.
you guys hoping for a boy? Were you hoping for a girl? Like what was the
I
thought
was hoping.
process and direction?
Yeah, I was hoping for a boy. I really wanted a girl boy combo, and then I would have been happy. To be honest with you, I wanted all boys. Just for the sake of the show, I'll be super
But
vulnerable here.
don't they say though, and you tell me now that you have two girls, that girl dad relationship is pretty incredible, and usually that mom boy relationship is pretty strong. So now that you have two girls, do you feel like that relationship is just really strong with them?
I wouldn't change it for the world. I love being a girl dad. So much so that I even started a podcast and made it my entire ethos and brand. I absolutely love being a girl dad. So it's super funny because I really wanted a boy. And then after Lily was born, I'm just like, man, I freaking love girls. It's so awesome. And then when Grace was born, it's even better. And they're just so sweet and soft. And but I have talked to a bunch of veteran girl dads, and they say that it's really fun until they're like 14, and then it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
horrible for
they
like
also
4 years.
they also say it's the inverse, right? With
Yeah,
boys, it's really difficult until an
yeah,
age, and then it
exactly.
becomes the opposite. Like my parents said that too. I have a sister, and they're like, Brian, like we thought you were going to be like a serial killer. I did crazy stuff for the podcast. I'll just say it for the podcast. Some of the crazy stuff I did, it all happened when I was like 2 years old. One is my dad was shaving, and I wanted to shave too. So I put like shaving cream all over my face and I shaved my left eyebrow off
Oh my God.
as part of it. Two is uh, there was like a cat and it had a bunch of kittens.
Yeah.
And I literally took one of the kittens and I tried to flush it down the toilet.
Oh my God.
And then the third, which is the worst of them all, is my mother was having like a party and she had all her friends over, and I came out to everyone like balancing something on my nose, and
Oh
like
my gosh.
what's on your nose? And it was her diaphragm that I was
Oh
balancing
my
on her nose. So they literally thought I was a terror and I was going to be the worst thing ever. And I understand and appreciate all the reasons they thought of it.
God.
But when I turned 13 or 12 or whatever, it just like completely changed. And I was like a saint, and
Oh.
they loved me and whatnot. And my sister was inverse. She was the best child possible. And then when she turned 13, it was like, oh my God, like this is crazy to have to deal with this little girl and all of her emotions that she has in play.
Oh my God, that reminds me of of Instagram reel that I saw about this mom talking about how, oh, boy moms are all, being a boy mom is awesome, but they forgot to tell you that it's like impossible to keep them alive. And I just like thought it was the funniest reel ever because boys are just so destructive, right? I like see these
Totally.
friends with boys come over and they just like, I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. But then they're like, no, it's not, because sometimes they hurt themselves.
Totally.
It's not even about breaking things. They literally like are so dangerous. They're just like
Totally.
out there. And I'm like, yeah, it's such a funny story. But you said that you grew up, you said you alluded to the fact that you grew up in a way where your parents basically are able to give you a lot of stuff. And so you're trying to mimic that. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what that means? Like, how did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of ingrained into who I am today. My mom was an entrepreneur and my dad was a sales guy. So you kind of
Oh, no kidding.
combine those two and you're like,
Yeah.
here's Brian, right? Um, Yeah, like I would say there's two parts of it. One is they both worked. My mom had her own business. She owned a travel agency. This was back in the day, before like airlines started cutting commissions. She probably had like 25 people working for her. She did really well.
Oh,
My
wow.
dad worked for a handful of appliance retailers, and then at the end he was working for T-Mobile, leading kind of sales and GM and channel sales and all that type of stuff. So, the downside and the difference between my life now and how I was raised is, my parents are both working all the time. So I had a woman who, was very involved in my life that helped raise me. And later in life, she would cook for us and clean for us and all that type of stuff. Um, so that's the downside, is like I didn't have as much time with my parents as I wanted. But the upside is like they could provide for anything, right? Because they both had really good paying jobs and all that type of stuff. I'd say in my life now, my wife's a full time mom, so I think my daughter is really getting like all of her attention. It's not like, I realize it's like the hardest job for my wife,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
think it's very fulfilling for her to be able to have that experience, and having grown up not necessarily like that, I really do appreciate the ability for her to spend as much time as possible with my daughter, and also appreciate when she doesn't want to spend time with my daughter too, because she's constantly with her all the time.
Yeah. So that's awesome though that you're able to kind of separate that kind of pros and cons of your childhood, and basically kind of take the best of both worlds, it sounds like, and you're able
Yeah,
to create
for,
a create
fair, and very fortunately, right? I mean, like
yeah.
you and I, we both work really hard, and like you go through life where you're working hard for kind of personal reasons in yourself, and then you start to have kids and a family, and it kind of flips where you're working really hard to provide for your family, kind of give them everything they want, make everyone happy, all that stuff. So, for me, I control my own schedule. I always joke I work harder now than I ever did in a corporate job. I'm
Hmm.
happier and it's more fulfilling. But if I think about like what's the North Star, it's really just making sure I can give to my family, make sure everyone's happy, and that we can, going forward, have just kind of a great ecosystem that we're building for all of us.
Yeah, that's really nice, man. That's really well said and so simplistic. I love it because you run a very complicated set of businesses and endeavors. So it's a very nice North Star. That's good, man. Do you do that often? Do you like talk to your wife about that stuff, or is it something that you just kind of house in your own brain?
Just on spending too much money. That's it. That's it, right? There's the pros and the cons to it, right?
Yeah,
The pros are you give, you give, you give. The cons are, we're in a world where it's very easy to spend a lot of money very quickly. So
it
that's
is.
it.
Yeah. And that's kind of the balancing act. That's the balancing act that you guys go through. That's good.
Totally, totally.
That's not a bad problem. That's a good life. Sounds like a good problem,
It,
man.
it was it was actually interesting. I was with a handful of people. I don't know if it was my partners or whatnot. I was just asking how everybody like works with their spouse in terms, and I could ask you too, right? Like we started with we had like one joint account, and then very quickly that just didn't work, right? So like
Mm.
everything kind of rolls through my accounts, and then I give her as needed. But everyone's different, right? Some people like it's just one thing everyone takes from it. Some people it's very organized and budgeted. It's just
Mhm.
very interesting how couples focus on financing because everyone seems to have a different approach.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and it's one of those things that people don't talk about enough because it's considered like one of the core things that makes or breaks a relationship. You know, it's uh, like it's like one of the five things, right? It's like it's pretty important because those like really impact every aspect and every decision and every value that you have. I mean, realistically speaking, it's a big deal, and so it's kind of funny how little we talk about it. But just to answer your question, I know you didn't ask me directly, but just to answer your question, we share everything. So my wife also is a stay-at-home mom, and she's a full-time mom, and we're really blessed that we can do that as well. And she takes full advantage of it. She's very involved in PTO, and she's in the school. She's a school mom. She's constantly volunteering, asking for more projects. She loves it, man, and she's like basically in the school all the time, right? Getting to
My,
see our
my, my,
kids and.
my, my wife's the same. What I joke, I'm like, you're the busiest unemployed person I know. Same thing. Boards, philanthropy, like you name it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, why are you so busy? And she's just so
Totally.
busy getting as involved as she can in the school, right? And so just being around her kids. So we're super blessed, man, and we're very, very fortunate and grateful for it. But as it relates to money, I'm very fortunate because she is not very fancy. And I have never had a problem because I just kind of monitor it. And there'll be times where things are tough. I'm not gonna lie. This year was a little rough for me. And she'll say stuff, like, hey, should we like, like not go to gym class or this and that? And I'm like, and I have to like remember that she's so far removed from the business, world that I'm like, that $30 a month gym class is not gonna make a big difference in our financial ecosystem. Like if it's like, like I mean, obviously every dollar counts, but we're not, it's not going to matter. Like, please continue to go to gym class with our kids. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, I'll just have to go make more money. I'll have to go work and make more money. But it's so fun because she's naturally very frugal and very even keeled. So it hasn't been a problem. And the few times that we have had like hardships financially, it's been very nice because it's very flat and she just spends and I just kind of roughly monitor it and it never really goes to a point where I'm like, oh, this is going to hurt our livelihood and lifestyle. And so I
Yeah.
think I'm lucky. Yeah.
You're very lucky. The comment I always make, which really goes on deaf ears, I'm like, just like pretend like I'm still, you know, making X amount per year, 26 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like take that mentality and just to right overhead. Doesn't matter.
So do you guys budget or do you guys don't do budget or you just try or
I brought it up the other night. I got yelled at.
okay, got it. So you just have to keep working harder and harder. I love it.
Totally.
It's not a bad relationship. Sounds like you guys have good relationship and communication around AORs
Don't
and
they say
yeah.
all the best relationships are opposites? Kind of like one
Oh
feels
yeah.
this way, one feels this way. Those are the best ones.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I have to go back to the question you asked me earlier. When you have another kid, do you want a boy or what do you want?
Oh man, I'm totally open now. I
No,
always wanted a boy, and then I had a girl, and I'm like, "Fuck this! Why do I want a boy?"
that's
I'm
right.
like,
That's exactly
I'm
what I
like,
said.
girls are the best. Like, I see all my friends with boys. What? I don't want that. I'm kind of the mindset. It would be nice to have one of each, but if I had a girl, I would be totally fun,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I love my daughter. Having more of her would be incredible.
I love that, man. That's awesome. And then, what do you think about being? Oh, I mean, you kind of alluded to it already, but like, what do you think about being a girl dad, and has it changed you in any way, and the way you think about life and
To-
business?
Totally. I don't know about life and business. I think not specific to a girl. I think what we talked about, just having any kid, has affected life and business, not necessarily a girl. Um, but what I would say is like I gotta keep lifting weights because I'm gonna have to
Mm.
be kicking ass of a lot of little boys at some point. Because my daughter's gonna be breaking some hearts. That I think that's
Yeah.
the hardest part to think about
Yeah.
and fathom.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm dreading that day. Yeah, it's the worst. Yeah, I'm still at the phase where my girls think it's like they're prettier if they wear more jewelry. So it's like so nonsensical. So I feel a little bit safe that we have time, but I know it's just a matter of time before it becomes problematic and I'm gonna be like dreading it emotionally. But
We're
um
we're we're 100% in the princess phase right now. Prince
that's
like
right.
this Moana and Ariel and Cinderella and Rapunzel, every princess, and then she watches something on TV and she's like, "Dada, Rapunzel has a blue dress. Go buy. Can you buy me a blue dress? You can buy it on Amazon for me or Target for me." It's like pretty crazy. I'm like, wow, you're clearly the daughter of my wife. That is most obvious, but the fact that she is what is hilarious, she is obsessed with Target and Starbucks. Like anytime we
Mm.
pass it or go to it, she just loves going to Target. And it's like, wow, very interesting that a 3-year-old is obsessed with these stores already. They're already building this brand fandom at such a young age, which is pretty incredible.
That is incredible, actually. My girls like Target and Starbucks too. You think that's a
There you go.
corporate marketing strategy?
It might be. I don't know. They're getting them in
Wow.
young.
That is interesting. As a marketer, I
Yeah.
thought I'd ask, but it sounds like
Well,
you're
it's
not
funny.
privy to
It's
that kind
fun.
of
It's funny.
information,
Well,
huh?
I grew up in Michigan, and like our big Target, we did have Target, but our like kind of Target equivalent was a store called Meijer, which still is all over the
Mm.
Midwest. And that's like my mom used to joke that Brian like Meijer like suited Brian's needs. Like Brian loved going to Meijer, and it's true. It was a combo of like the big Targets have a grocery store, right? So it had all the clothes and outdoor and all that stuff, but it also had grocery. So I would go to Meijer all the time, and I was the biggest like little brand advocate of Meijer growing up. And I feel like that's what my daughter is doing with Target, which from their perspective should be phenomenal in terms of being able to get them into the funnel from such a young age, and hopefully have them keep going thereafter.
Nice. Awesome. So as you think about like turning into a dad now, and now you're kind of like thinking about possibly another kid and all this kind of like settling of your house and space, what does success look like for you now versus like before having kids? Like, what are you trying to aim for?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I see it in my parents now, and you just don't think about until you have kids that like you just want your kids to be even better than you and more successful than you. So I
Hmm.
think now it's all about providing the right infrastructure and ecosystem for my daughter to thrive in to
Hmm.
ultimately be better than me, right? Like
Mm.
neither of my parents really went to college. My mom went to Eastern Michigan, dropped out after a year to go be a travel agent. My dad didn't really go. So me going to college was like a big thing, and I went to Indiana, right? And I love Indiana. I'm not going to say anything bad about Indiana, but like if my daughter does go to college and gets into like a Stanford or Harvard or something like that, like that's better than me, right? Like, so I think
Yeah.
you think about it from this perspective, which is how can you make your kid even better than you and leave the world a better place with your kindred than you essentially had coming into it.
Yeah, that's really aspirational. I love that goal, man. That's awesome.
And by the
You're
way, she
so
might not go to any college and still be smarter than me, right? Starting a business, selling a business, who knows, right? I feel like by the time she's of college age, it's going to be a whole different world in terms of what you define success as. Like even you as a small business owner, like that is totally successful. Like my dad had me read a book when I was like 18 called The Millionaire Next Door. And it
yeah.
was just talking about, people who own trash companies, right? And like all these things that you just don't realize because they're super humble and under the radar, but they have millionaire status. And I think like building a world for her where she can be really successful and she can define what success means. It doesn't have to be monetarily, but like she feels like she's in a better spot than me. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that's I love that, man. Thanks for qualifying that. That really is meaningful to have it beyond even just finances because you're right. Success is like really just having, happiness and being able to provide for yourself and being a contributing member of society. And so as long as they're smarter and better than us in that way, or even happier than us, that is a huge win. That's a huge
Yeah, and
win.
some people like I'm making it up, like they'd be totally happy living in a foreign country, making no money, surfing all day. Like everyone has a different perspective of what happiness and success looks like. Finance may be important for some people, but for many people it might not be, right? It's other
Mhm.
aspects of life and quality that are more important than making money.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I mean, and this is exactly like why I love my wife so much because she does not qualify success with money at all. She's like super zen and like she loves gardening and she's like very like just outdoorsy and for her success is like working in the field together and like those times and moments. It's super weird. I don't understand it, but I know that
It's
it's the
awesome.
opposite of me. But like the polarity of the two parents, I know is going to be very beneficial for our kids because we're so different that I think it's going to be helpful for them to grow up in that kind of polarity. So I don't know.
100%.
Um, yeah. Hey, let me switch gears here and let me get some make sure that I know you're a busy man, so I'm gonna get my rapid fire questions in here. Um, so Brian, if you had to give some advice to soon to be parents or other parents, what would you give them now being a veteran dad of 3 years?
Three things. Well, some of them are changed over time, but some of this comes back to financial. Sorry, even though I said it's not important. Getting a night nurse, getting a night nurse if you could afford it is a game
Yeah,
changer.
yeah.
Mostly for the dad. Um, the snoo was a game changer for us, which
Mm,
was baby's crying, put him in the snoo, turn it on, baby's not crying.
mm,
And then for a while, the pacifier was a big thing for us. That was
mm.
also a game changer until we got to a point she just started pulling it out and throwing it and not caring. But I always say those are like my three pieces of advice for a new parent that I was given, and I think they were all great pieces of advice.
Yeah, those are great ones. I love it. Yeah, I mean it's literally torture. And that's what's the funny thing about it is like, they like when you think about like I don't know if I can't remember how I learned this, but I was reading somewhere about like an old Chinese torture technique in like the Middle Ages where they would let you basically get like 5 minutes of like, light sleep and right before you hit REM, they would wake you up with a splash of water. So basically you can't ever get into REM or deep sleep, right? And that's the concept is like it's just constant like set like it's this like tickling of torture. And I'm like, that's literally what the first year of having a kid is like. You know what I mean? It's like the
Totally.
moment you just start to get into REM, it's like you have to wake
And
up,
and I think what people don't tell you. So I think during the first year, people tell you it because of all the sleep regressions. I think what people don't tell you is like, dude, if my daughter's 3 and she still wakes up sometimes in the middle of the
Yeah.
night. So it's like it doesn't stop, right? I think it's till 5 or 6 or something like that that it
Yeah.
keeps going. So like there's still like, oh my God, I'm sleeping, I'm sleeping. Oh my, why is she making noise? I just want to go to bed.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So let me go to the next question here. If wait, what are my gosh, I forgot my rapid fire questions. I'm gonna mix them up here a little bit, but
It's all good.
do you have a favorite book that you could like to recommend or you like to read? It could be both business or
I,
life.
I have lots of books.
Mhm.
As I've got older, I haven't had as much time to read. There's a few. One of them that I'm a big fan of is the 48 Rules of Power. It's a very large book. It's a lot of ancient traditions, but it essentially shows how you can always get the upper hand on somebody and ultimately get whatever you want. So persuasion, negotiation, all that stuff.
That is such a crazy book. It is nuts, dude. I I've
I think
never
I
read
think
it
I think
fully,
I
but
think I think rule number two is always give someone a gift.
is
Because
it?
you immediately gain power over someone when you gift them something. Yeah, there's 48 of them, right? So there's lots of interesting ones, but that was one that immediately comes to mind that I always found very interesting, and I do the gifting a lot as a way to essentially gain that power.
That is interesting. Yeah. I have it on my audio book, so I'm slowly listening to it when I'm flying and stuff and when I'm not with the kids because it's dense. It's actually
It
like
is
it's
it
very
it it it, it is dense. There's also oh man, I'm looking over at my book, The Art of War. Have you read that one too?
Oh yeah, yeah. That one's a
That's
little
also
easier to read.
it's
Yeah.
well, it's easier because it's shorter, but it's also very intense, like 48 Rules of Power.
Mhm.
That like, like I grew up with like ADD. I don't think I have it anymore, but reading's always been an interesting one for me because if I don't get like really into it, I start thinking of other things when I'm reading. So,
Mhm.
with 48 Rules of Power, I start thinking of other things, but then I get to the next one, I'm like, okay, it brings me back. And then I get to the next one and it like brings me back, even though it's
Yeah.
so dense because the rule is so interesting in terms of how they're applying it.
Do you go back and read these books, or do you kind of just leave them in your brain and kind of work off of the repository?
I read them once and I don't read them again.
Okay, good, good, good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just
I
wanted. I was
try and
just curious.
remember lots of aspects of it depending on the book. I pick the things that are most relevant.
Yeah, you cherry pick the things and store it in there. Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
Let's go to the next thing. So when you're not building size or being an advisor for these awesome companies and being a super dad, what does Brian do for fun? What is your downtime activities?
I unfortunately got in an accident a few months ago, but I work out pretty gnarly and pretty heavily. Lifting heavy weights has always been kind of a release. Both I just enjoy it, but it's also when you're so stressed. So I try and spend a lot of time on the fitness side of it and the health side. And then
Nice.
like life changes where weekends used to be sports, which it still is sports as much as I can, but it's also birthday parties and events and holidays and all this stuff
Yeah.
with the fam. So I feel, and we're starting to get in. We do activities like swim and whatnot, but we're starting to get into soccer and ballet and dance and tap. And everyone I've talked to with kids older, and maybe you could attest to this, the activities are what ends up taking up the weekends at this
Oh
point for the
yeah.
kids. And it only gets more and more as they get older.
Yeah, it's bad, man. We're 5 and 7. I mean, it's like 80% gone. And I mean, all the veteran parents tell me like it's not gonna get any better for at least 10 more years. And so,
Totally. Totally.
yeah. But Brian,
Yeah.
thank you so much, man, for being on my show. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are, so it's been really great for you to chat with me.
Yeah, it's great to spend time, and I hope you have a great holiday with your family.
Yeah, happy holidays to you as well too. Thank you, brother. We'll see you soon, okay?
Take it easy, man.